Hey, sorry that I'm late. Every single week I say this is going to be the week that I have no technical challenges, but unfortunately my phone didn't connect. My phone wasn't connecting. Looks like it's still having a problem because I'm at the cottage. So anyway, here we are, and thank you so much for people who are joining me and are patient with this journey in technology. So I'm hoping that it works. Hey, glad to see some people joining. That's great. And I apologize for being late. So welcome to this week's episode of Talking to Artists, a basic podcast, which is a casual conversation with artists and people within the art world, designed really for artists, for emerging artists, for wannabe artists, and also for art lovers, just to kind of, and art collectors, just to get a bit of a better sense of what goes on behind the scenes. So very excited this week to talk to Sage. I can't believe I mispronounced her first name. I was so focused on not mispronouncing her last name. Sage Szkabarnicki-Stuart. So quite an amazing, I'd say surrealist, maybe a surrealist photographer, portrait photographer. It'll be interesting to see how she actually describes herself and her work. But I first met Sage, I saw her work actually at the distillery. And then I first actually met her in person. She was my neighbor at last year's One of a Kind, which was quite a wonderful opportunity to kind of really get to know her and get to sort of see her work and, you know, live with it for the 11 days that you do the One of a Kind show. So we're just going to wait for her to join us. And hopefully that will happen. Oh, I see. Thanks. Oh, I see Jane has joined us, Jane Fleetwood Morrow. So she's my guest next week, which will be really exciting and so different from what Sage is doing, which is really cool. And then Vicky Crothers after that is very, very different ideas. Sage, should I try and join? Let me try and see if I can join you, Sage. Yes, you should join. Let me just, I apologize here. Let's just try. Oh, here she is. Yeah, so let me get Sage on board. And hopefully it will work because my Wi-Fi is really sucky. Holy cow, I don't know what happened to my screen.
Oh, there.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I swear to you, every single week, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go over everything, going to be no technical issues. This morning I go on at 11 o'clock and my phone can't find a connection.
Oh,
So
no.
it's just like some sort of update I had to do.
Oh, well, that's fine.
Anyway, yeah, I'm glad you could join us.
Okay.
So I was just saying that I first ran into your work actually at the distillery, but then we were lucky enough to be neighbors at the One of a Kind, which was really cool. It was really cool for me to be able to actually, you know, spend your work is really so striking. Yeah, it's nice to be able to spend some time with it, I found, and just to learn a bit about your inspiration. But also what I thought was just fascinating is to watch actually the customers as they're walking by. They're kind of how they see your work.
Yeah, that was very fun. I was glad that you were my neighbor because you
Yeah,
were
it
the
was
best
fun.
neighbor. Yeah.
I'm so disappointed we can't do it again this year. But
Yeah, I
are you
know.
going to do the online one?
I don't think I didn't do super well at that show. I think because my work was so odd. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think people who were there really wanted to, as you said, spend time staring at like really just a bit sometimes off-putting, a bit odd photos. I've done better at other things, so I think I won't do that one again. But
Yeah, it feels like more of a probably more pure fine art type of venue might be better for you.
yeah, it seems to do read a lot, like quite well at the artist project. That's a really good one for
Yeah.
for whatever reason. And outdoor art fair actually has been really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So maybe I would love to kind of hear about your process. Like I think that was the part that fascinated me, and I think that your work has been described as this kind of surreal photography, and obviously from everything that I've seen, you use yourself as your model.
Yeah.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you come up with these really amazing themes about kind of our place in the environment and how you're able to really beautifully illustrate that?
Yeah. So I started because I was doing photo work for other people. Travel and take photos of really interesting people and videos, but unfortunately I didn't have like the skill set that a lot of people who are very good at that have, which is to be like really entertaining and charming and be able to make people feel comfortable in front of the camera. So I came home and I've sort of burnt out because I'm not an extroverted person. So, you know, after you go through something like that, it's an amazing experience, but you're just exhausted in a way that I think people who are just naturally really outgoing or not, they're like energized by it. So I
Yeah.
still wanted to use the medium of photography, which I'd gotten pretty decent at using and familiar with. But I wasn't able to like find people to be in my photos. So I used,
I mean, there's not a lot of people that would put themselves in with the raccoons. And surprising.
yeah, so it became sort of like a like, you know how some people draw in their diary, it was like that but with photos. And I guess it made sense then that it would be myself because um you know it's about your feelings, so why not have yourself in it. Yeah, so that's how I started, and then I just kept really focusing on kind of the idea of opulence at first. Like I did not have very much money. I was living in the cheapest apartment I could possibly find on Craigslist in Montreal, which is very, very cheap. And I wanted to think about like, okay, if this is my future, how am I going to, you know, be comfortable and feel the same kind of sense of achievement that some people feel when they make a lot of money, for instance, but without making any money? Like, what does that mean in this kind of world where we're brought up to succeed financially, and that's really important. And so I started creating images that reflected sort of like, I did one of a costume in just breakfast cereal, but it was it was like an Elizabethan like royal gown basically, and I did a few like that, and I really focused on that as well as just like emotions that I was having day to day. And then yeah, it seemed people liked it, so that was good. But
And
that's
so do you, to sort of, what kind of process do you have to go through to decide that that this is actually what you're going to do? Like in terms of with the raccoon one and with the swans, where you're in the swans with the outfit made of plastic
yeah.
forks, which I think is just lovely. Like that's obviously a huge amount of planning and working and thinking to get to that point where you can photograph it. So what's kind of your thinking process, or how do you know when that's the thing you're going to do?
Um, it's sort of, you start with a concept and it doesn't work out, and then as you're working on like executing it, you create something that's new that you didn't think would exist before, which is cool. I guess that's how it differs. Well, in drawing, I guess you can do that too, to a certain extent, but I think because you're limited to what you can do in the physical world, it changes it so much from the original concept, and you have to be willing to let go of that. But yeah, so for I usually pick a theme. So it's just depending on what I've been doing in the area. So with the High Park, with the swans, I was collecting a lot of litter in High Park during the spring. So I was interested in how the animals kind of love litter because it's a sign that there's food around. And so yeah, so it was kind of neat because the swans and all the animals there are already used to animals and pre-trained. So all you do is show up with things related to food, which is just forks and spoons. They recognize it. And
Really, that's crazy.
yeah, it was crazy. It's very different from like going to a remote location because the animals are so used to humans and they have their own way of interacting with them. So yeah, it always starts a bit different, and then as I'm going through, it changes a lot from my original idea. But
And so for that one, so obviously, so when you built that, like the crown and the outfit and everything with the spoons and forks, are those ones then that you actually did pick up off the bound, or was that kind of the inspiration of creating this costume?
I started with a costume that I created completely out of styrofoam that I collected from the park, and it was so disgusting. Like I went and they loved it. Like I was actually on shore, so they came out of the water to kind of check it out, which was great, but it was so ugly and disgusting. So when I did this costume, I had a fair amount of forks and spoons that I could use, but I didn't have enough. So in the cupboard, like in one of the cupboards of the place I was staying, they had plastic forks and spoons. I just used those because yeah, it probably would have been a lot gnarlier if I had used just pure litter at that point.
Well, gnarlier, but maybe not quite so beautiful a piece.
Yeah.
Like, because I think that the really lovely thing about that one is that it's you totally get the message there, and I love the fact that it's all actually shot the way it is as opposed to superimposed or anything like that, which I think is one of the really amazing and unique things about your work. But fundamentally, it's still a really beautiful piece that people would want to have on their wall. Like you were talking about, not necessarily being okay with the financial piece of it, but obviously it's kind of nice when people actually want to spend money to buy something you've created, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's always nice.
Yeah.
I
And you have to tell me about the raccoon one because that one just fascinates me too.
That was one of the first ones I did, and it was yeah, that was I was really trying for someone to be in the photo, and no one would even help me shoot it. Like they didn't want to get anywhere near that. So, which I was really surprised because it's a very popular area. Like if you go during the day, people are just hanging out and the raccoons come onto the benches and stuff. So, I guess they just really didn't want to participate. But yeah, so I went when there was no one there, so it was really early in the morning, which might have been a factor. And because I'm the only person there, all of these raccoons that are so used to getting fed and so used to people could smell the baguettes that I was wearing. And so they just sort of like came across, there's a little barrier where they sleep and they all crawled across and then came in and they were going and just climbing and breaking off pieces of the baguettes and stuff. And it wasn't very long. I was there for like 15 minutes. And it was really fun. It was a bit like they squabble amongst themselves, which is really scary because they're quite vicious, but they're quite polite with humans because they want to get fed.
So you weren't really ever scared or nervous about?
No, yeah. Because the etiquette, like I wasn't moving towards them, they'd come to me and they had this sort of etiquette where they would, grab things, run off, and then they would squabble amongst themselves sometimes, like further away. So they were dealing with their own territorial issues, but not like on my
You
feet.
weren't part of their territory issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
But it was interesting because I didn't realize that they could be so vicious. But I mean, well, they would snarl at each other, but it was sort of like a hissy fit, I think. They
Yeah,
seemed,
I can see that being a little bit disconcerting though.
yeah.
And so when you decide to do that piece, like I'm assuming it looks like a lot of your stuff is about kind of that kind of the role of human beings in a kind of a natural environment and how we kind of maybe craft. Well, maybe you can actually say it better than I can.
Yeah.
Our impact.
Well, for the raccoons one?
Well, for everything, it seems like there's kind of this kind of connection of a human being being kind of pushed into a natural environment or an
Oh,
environment that they don't belong, but they force themselves into is kind of how I sort of see some of them.
yeah, I think, yeah, it was really like I capitalize on city animals because they are so used to humans. Like it's just a different it's a different dynamic than wild animals. And I think sometimes people want to believe otherwise, but um I think I don't know. I think also sometimes we, especially in cities, we don't want to interact with the environment, which I understand because there's so many of us and it would just destroy our parks. But at the same time, I think if like I grew up in a smaller or more rural environment and interacting is such a pivotal part of like becoming involved in stewardship as well. So it's a really weird balance. And yeah, I just want to show people that the animals that are in our parks, they look back at us and they judge us and they're aware of us, sort of in a way that we're aware of them. Like it's not just they're these wild animals that are existing untouched by man. Like we have more of an impact, I think, on even wild spaces and like really remote parks than we think we do. So I definitely want to incorporate that into my pictures because like even like parks way up north, I mean we talk about my mom used to help settle treaties for First Nations, and one of the issues is that these really remote areas would, even though like theoretically they should be just naturally pristine, they're not. They've been affected by pollution, they've been affected even by hydro dams, which are a really good sustainable resource. Like so we have this concept that there's somewhere that's pure, and it's not true. We're actually part of nature a lot more than we think we are. And fracking, that
Yeah.
was a big issue with the First Nations. But anyway, yeah, so I wanted to, I always think about that when I'm taking the photos for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think they're just, yeah, I just love them. And so,
Thank you.
talking about your mom, you obviously come from a family of artists like I do. Your mother is an artist. I think she's got a show right now of her
Yeah, we just
figurative
finished.
pieces.
Yeah, she did a series of dancers. and it
Yeah.
was really nice. There's little sketches, and then she had bigger paintings as well. And she did really well. A ton of people bought the stuff, which was great.
Oh, they're beautiful. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
love her work too. And so, did you find sort of because I don't think you don't have a degree in fine arts, so you are sort of self-taught as a photographer, but obviously you've had that kind of direction and passion and maybe encouragement from your family.
Yeah. Yeah, my parents were always very, very supportive. I never had to worry about my parents disapproving of my art, which is good. And I think from an early age, my mom really encouraged me to draw and stuff, especially drawing. That was a big
Hmm.
thing when I was a kid because she likes drawing and I really liked drawing. So we would go to like life drawing stuff sometimes together because she did it with other people in Ottawa, so she knew where to go, which was really special, I think.
Yeah, I thought the other thing that I loved because your mom was that one of a kind with you, right? And
Yeah,
it was she was just so bursting with pride. I think that you were
yeah,
there and you were producing your work and you had something that was so unique. I think, and so which is so hard to do these days to create something that's a unique vision of what you're doing.
well, thank you. Yeah,
But
no,
and she did invite me to Salt Spring Island, and just to let you know, I am going to show up on her
yay,
doorstep one day because it
you
looks beautiful
should.
out there.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It'll be really nice, and they'll treat you very well. And yeah, it's a lot of nice hiking and exploring and stuff like that here, which is really good. I find it a lot easier to take photos here too, and I think it's just because it also there's fewer people, so there's just more freedom to do more stuff, which is always a good
Well,
thing.
especially now, wherever in the city, having such a lockdown, right?
Yeah, yeah, big time. Yeah,
So,
there's
what's your next thing? You must be being quite inspired then with sort of the whole changes that you were talking earlier about things like the one of a kind is difficult as an introvert, and I can tell you as an extrovert, this lockdown is really hard for extroverts. It's like I'm dying to go talk to people.
yeah.
But
How
so you must have been giving some cool thoughts as to your next project based on this.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing a project that I'm calling it Pangea. So it's about sort of the relationships between native and non-native species. I think it's actually a really untapped area there where we have one very strong point of view about invasive species, and there's actually a really strong and a lot of evidence on the other side of that debate. So I want to highlight that. So I'm photographing different flowers. Ideally across Canada. We'll see how that goes. With particularly what we would consider introduced or invasive species of flowers that are actually kind of like watering holes for all kinds of native animals. And I want to sort of show people the different biodiversity that exists, especially in things like weeds or plants that we would root out. Um, and also just point out that like there's more of a symbiotic relationship between introduced and native plants than we are often led to believe. Because I think it's very telling about other relationships we have, especially when I hear people who are when they complain about immigrants. It's often a lot of the same arguments that I hear invasive species biologists use, which I find kind of scary. So I want to
Scary, but
show.
quite fascinating that you'd make that connection.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it shows us that we're not perfect. Like we can use the same arguments in a natural sense that we would consider really offensive if we were dealing with humans. Which there's a reason sometimes you can't treat nature in the same way as you can treat human rights. It's different, but I think it can show us a lot about our points of view, and the point and how we interpret other people's points of view. So yeah, I'm working on that, and then just continuing with the self portraits too a little bit, but mostly that I think is more interesting for me right now.
Yeah, that's. I'm really looking forward to seeing that because that's a really interesting thought. Being kind of an avid gardener when I first moved into my house, there was all native plants, which I felt really guilty actually pulling some of them out because some of them were stuff like goldenrod. So my husband would have like terrible hay fever, right? And I'm like, I just don't want that in my garden. It's a small garden, right?
Yeah,
And so you introduce other things that bring beauty and joy and stuff to your life. So thank you. I feel less guilty about that now.
yeah. Butterfly bush is a really great plant. It's also considered invasive, but it's a really great plant. It attracts a lot of native wildlife.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, I remember too, even dandelions, right? Like I remember as a kid seeing these huge fields all of dandelions, and they're so beautiful, right? And people eat the greens, and so
yeah,
although technically they're invasive, I mean, you sort of think about how often you go to the grocery store, and dandelions are a staple part of your diet, right?
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the ones I want to do is dandelions because yeah, they're a great watering hole for different types of bees and things like that. So
And they're great when they go to the seed too. Well,
yes,
not for the neighbors, I guess, but
they're very pretty.
yeah,
They're fun.
I think they bring back something I don't know of a childhood too. Like because when you're younger, you run through them and the seeds go everywhere, and you can feel all the adults go, "Oh, those seeds are going to be my garden."
Yeah, exactly. It's a good feeling. Yeah, so that's what I'm working on. And
Oh, that sounds really cool.
yeah,
So I also want to talk to you a little bit about. I guess you did I think fairly early on in your career, you did a residency in Japan, which
yeah,
led to the bento box.
yeah. That was
So,
fun.
can you talk a little bit about your experiences in doing residencies? I haven't done one. It's on my to-do list, but it always sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was it's like a very small. It was in a former bathhouse, which was really interesting because in Japan, onsens, which are these like public bathhouses, used to be just where you would go to clean yourself off. So it was renovated, and it was for 3 months, which is a really long time. But I'm glad I did 3 months because I only got 2 photos done. Um, and it's nice to have like a cultural liaison in a place where you don't speak the language. But Japan is also a great place because people have the patience to have entire conversations with you over Google Translate, which was
Wow,
just,
that's great.
yeah, like and yes, it's more expensive, but um, in terms of getting lost, like you don't have to worry about. I remember even in France, I went with my friend a really long time ago, and we just wandered off, and then people were going like, no, 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 we have to get, and we ended up being taken out with a car just to leave a certain neighborhood because they were worried about safety of and you just don't I don't think you have to worry about that particularly in Japan. It's not something I usually notice anyway, but that's something I think matters to a lot of people. um, and I love the fact that in Japan you can anyway. So in terms of the residency though, I don't know. I think I would next time I would just travel somewhere personally. My another person who did the residency really enjoyed it because the organizer sort of takes you to different museums and introduces you to people. But I think it depends how like what your goals are. I would outline with them like if I had a schedule that I had to follow, and then she had sort of her own schedule that conflicted with mine, and I had to follow it because I had to finish some stuff for to deliver to someone. So I think all of that needs to be clear before you go because you can end up missing out on a lot of stuff. And also making sure that there are other people at the residency when you go, because when I went, I was the only person. So that wasn't super great, but it was an amazing, like she was very well connected and like her friends and everything were really good. And that part was really valuable.
But I
So
guess you missed the interconnectivity of meeting artists from presumably around the globe if you're doing something in Japan, right?
yeah, yeah. And there, because I think what was neat is that the people that I met were from all different kinds of professional backgrounds. So there were coffee shop owners and translators and all kinds of different people. There was even like a woman from France who was translating for the Olympics. Um, but I didn't meet many other like people who were doing art. So I missed out on that, I think, a little bit. But and it's just nice to have, someone. I don't know. I hoped there would be other people there who were like new as well because it's nice to do something new together. So I would make
It's also
sure.
nice, but it's also nice to I think to do something like that with other artists who, you can sit there and you can have an art conversation with hours for someone who's another artist that normal people just don't want to have, right? And
Yeah,
so I think that sometimes that's where some of the collaboration and stuff comes up and the crazy ideas start to happen because you're so I don't know, engrossed in the practice of making art,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So I was sad about that, but other than that, it was really good. But I would just make sure. You assume that it's a given, but I think I would double check and make sure before going again whether or not those things are, whether or not there are other people there or what the schedule and the plan is and stuff like that. I was,
Like how much free time you have to work on your own
yeah,
piece.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
because I was talking to another artist a couple of years ago, actually, at Art Prize, and she was doing a residency, I think, in Latvia, and she was saying that they had a huge amount of free time, And again, sort of when you're in a country that you don't speak the language, and Latvian, like Japanese is sort of, it's not a language you sort of hear, like some of the Romance languages you can start to pick something up, but she said that was a little bit weird too. It was almost the opposite. They were sort of left in this huge museum. It's like, go create something cool.
Oh
You know.
dear. Interesting. Yeah, no, I think you need to get to know people. Like that's the point.
Yeah, that's what I would, and that's what I enjoyed with the trip I did to China too. Like, you know,
Oh, you
we're still connected.
oh that
Yeah, and
is
it was really fun. It was like I think they said there was 70 artists from 50 different countries or something.
oh wow.
And so one day we just shared, like it was interesting to share the inspiration for your art, and especially as you have countries that were very open about areas that where you don't really have full freedom of speech, and that the role of the artist to try and start to navigate some of those conversations, like in the same way you're looking to try and start conversations about kind of the environment as non-invasive plants. A lot of them were sort of talking about that from a political point of view. So it was really neat. And it's also just fascinating to me how you can have whole conversations with somebody who doesn't speak, you don't speak the same language, and yet
Yeah,
somehow you can get a lot out of those conversations.
yeah, that is fascinating. That is a really cool spot to go as an artist.
Yeah, it was. We didn't do much creating. We did sort of plein air one day, which is not really my personal thing, but because, you know, I'm abstract.
Yeah,
But it
me
was
too.
really fun. The experience was good.
Yeah, it
But
sounds like
unlike
it.
you,
I
I
guess
didn't come
you
out of
take
there
a lot
with a
home.
great piece of art.
Well, that's the
So yeah, I
thing.
was
I
just
think
looking.
you like that's why I was yeah, the why maybe it's better to do like a residency and then also maybe travel would be separate, and travel is more, you know, project oriented where you finish something, and residencies are more just learning about a different culture,
Yeah.
because it seems people have trouble getting stuff done at residencies. That's the issue.
So would you do
But I
one
guess
again
it's
then?
not. Yeah, I think I would. I would, but yeah, and I think I would go in with the expectation that I'm not gonna expect myself to make a bunch of work when I go. I think that's the takeaway. But
Yeah.
I haven't
So just
found, yeah, I
kind of
haven't,
be at one with the vibe of what's going on and just let it happen.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So that would be interesting. I was supposed
Not
to
that
do New York, but uh, COVID, so I didn't do it.
I was, yeah, not that anyone's traveling anywhere for the next little while.
So we'll
And
see
I'm trying to
about that.
figure out if I can even go to Vancouver, being in Toronto.
Yeah, it's you can. I mean, I did it, so the airports don't go on a holiday. I went on a holiday by accident and it was packed. But I
Really?
think yes, it was shocking. I think all the staff were super overwhelmed. I don't think anyone was anticipating it. I almost missed my flight. Um, but I think in general it's quite empty in there. And the airplanes, they require you to wear your mask at all time, and the air filtration systems on those things is like it's like a pressurized room in a hospital. So I wouldn't worry too much unless, you know, someone takes off their mask and starts coughing. Um,
Right.
and you know, I self-isolated. That's the issue. You need to be there for at least 2 weeks to self-isolate.
And you're in Vancouver Island now, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was for 2 weeks. I self-isolated and then moved into my parents' house for the rest of the stay. And I'm staying for a month and a half. So I spent 2 weeks of that, yeah, in isolation basically.
Oh, nice. Well, sounds good.
Yeah,
So, who do you have any artists that you are that kind of inspire you, or
yeah.
you just kind of just do your thing? Like
Um,
Cindy Sherman obviously comes to mind since she was did a lot of self portraits as well.
yeah. Um, it's funny, I didn't know about Cindy Sherman until after, but it's interesting to see how similar the stuff is. So now I went to see her show in Vancouver, I think last time I was here, and that was really great. That was very inspiring just to see, especially her sense of humor, because she did like high fashion self portraits where she would just make herself as ugly as possible and as unglamorous as possible while wearing like very expensive clothing. And I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
And in terms of my own inspiration, it comes, I mean, there's a lot of people who, like Kara Crab comes to mind. She was someone who created, so the raccoon photo I did, she actually did something very similar before. And I had seen it on Tumblr, like when I was in my late teens, and just it's sort of, I never could find who actually did it, but it was so imprinted in my mind that I was like, I need to do something like this. So I took the memory of that to encourage myself to go out and do sort of something with raccoons as well, but with a different, like a more, I don't know, like I guess it was more of a flattering costume. And then years later, she saw the photo and was like, hey, I also did this. And then I found her work, and she was actually a writer for Vice, and everything about it was just so wonderful. And now we follow each other on Instagram, and I still follow her work because her work is really, she's got such a good sense of humor, and she's very intelligent. So I really like her stuff.
Well,
And
it's cool to be able to communicate then with somebody, like to have
yeah,
somebody who's an inspiration that you can actually have a relationship with. That's
yeah,
so neat.
exactly. Yeah, it was so great because you see that was in the days, I guess now too, where you would find something online, there'd be no credit, there was no like knowledge. I didn't know about reverse Google image search. Like now I could do that, but at the time I had no idea what that was, and or even I guess it would have
Probably
existed.
didn't even exist.
Yeah, it probably didn't. So and then you lose the image forever, and it's just like in your brain. So it was amazing to actually full circle find the person. And I'm trying to think of like the most, I don't know what the most inspiring person would be, but I definitely a lot of filmmakers, and I don't, just like really generic, cool. Like I was very inspired by Quentin Tarantino. I don't know why. It's just I liked the attitude of some of his films, like Pulp Fiction. I was
Well,
sort of,
it's kind of raw, right? Like I think
yeah,
in a lot of ways I can see a parallel because the work's really raw, and some of I think too the way he shoots stuff, his colors and stuff they're like a little bit off, right?
yeah, exactly, yeah. And also I like the fact that he makes so many references to other films. Like his films are sort of almost mashups of other people's really good cinema that you may have never heard of. So then you can go and like Google his films and find all of these other really great films. And so I don't, like, the weird thing about my work is that I feel as though there are all of these references, but I need to get better at pinning down what they are and letting people know about them, because I just have to get better at like tracking who I actually like. When you ask about inspiration, it makes me think of that because I struggle to name people, and I think it's just because I have, an interior Pinterest board of uncredited work that I think is really great, and I need to actually know who makes it. So that would be a good thing. That's actually made me think about that.
I like your idea of your internal Pinterest board now. But don't you think too, like I think too, you can get little pieces of really important inspiration out of someone or something or experience without it necessarily being your overarching inspiration.
Yeah,
Like there are different things that inspire me too, and they're for very specific colors or for specific compositions or even just the way someone will write or talk about their work or something. So, I can't say that there's one big person who inspires me. I want to be them, right?
yeah,
It's a mashup, like you say.
yeah, that's definitely more accurate, I think.
And
Um,
even being on Instagram too, like you see different things. I see things too that I save and they inspire me, even though they're completely different from anything I do or anything I've
yeah,
even been thinking about, but it just talks to me somehow.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, Instagram is very useful. Actually, that makes me think of a really good photographer that I love and whose work I think is you can see the inspiration from is Synchro Dogs. I think they're called Synchro Dogs Official or Synchro Dogs Officiel with an underscore. They're really good photographers. And then the guy who did I Spy was a big inspiration, like an early inspiration. The books where they had like all
Oh,
of
the
these,
comics with,
yeah, with all the different photos, and
oh,
find the particular little object. That for some reason I was obsessed with that. So
yeah,
that's definitely
those are great. A little bit of photography, Where's Waldo?
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
and actually he has my book now, which is really cool. He got
Oh,
my
that's
photo.
so neat.
Yeah, so that was another full circle, which was nice. And he's just he does all kinds of really object oriented, like high detail. Um, Anything super high detail for someone like me is very appealing. So yeah, that's sort of the inspiration.
Hmm. Well, that sounds amazing. So what's on, so you're working on your invasive species piece, and you're working on some more self-portraits. Do you have what's your next show, or what's your next thing you're working towards? Or are you just kind of working?
I think that I was supposed to have a show for Contact, but obviously all of my shows were canceled, so that was too bad. But I don't know if there's anything lined up. I guess I'm gonna do art fairs. I'm gonna take the risk. There's one in Vancouver, the notorious Art Vancouver, which was canceled this year, so now I have to do it next year.
Right.
And then I'm going to apply for the artist project again because I like that show. And that's all I have right now. I'm going to see if I can do some public art. That would be fun. But yeah, that's all I have planned because of COVID, because everything
Yeah.
just died.
How did you end up being in the distillery? That's where I first saw your big piece with the candle.
Oh, that was fun. That was it. That was lucky. So for the Contact Festival, which is a photography festival, but if you're a photographer, back in the day, I think still you can apply as just a random artist who doesn't have a venue. And it's sort of the third tier of applications. And what they do is they have a pool of venues that want an artist but don't have an artist, and then they sort of match make. And at the last
Hmm.
minute, the distillery district, they said, "Oh, we're interested in doing Contact," and they found my work, so they called me like 2 days before their submission deadline, and I was like, "Yes, of course, I will do that."
Yeah,
Um,
really. Oh, let me think about that for a bit.
and they were so nice. Like that was the best exhibition experience I've ever had. Like they installed everything themselves. They were very knowledgeable. It was actually the head of the distillery who came up with the idea to do the vinyl on directly on the brick and different surfaces, which was brilliant. He does all of the art for the distillery district, and it's very like it's the kind of art that people interact with a lot, and people go and want to see as almost a tourist destination. So he's very smart. And it also, it impacts people, and it's very meaningful for people. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so he came up with that, and and yeah, so they installed it while I was in Japan. So I came back from Japan to see it. Um, and it was pretty straightforward. We worked with Toronto Imageworks to print off the images, and then they promoted it. They even bought a huge ad in the Contact photography book, which was amazing. And I think it was one of the biggest exhibitions that, like in terms of size, of Contact, which was crazy. And it was all over the distillery, like almost like a little egg hunt. What did they call it? Easter egg hunt? Easter egg
Easter
hunt.
egg hunt. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, do you find that people recognize you from that?
Yeah, especially at art fairs, they know the candle head,
Yeah.
because and there were people a lot of people sent me photos that they found on dating apps where people would pose in front of the candle head and use it as their profile, which I
I saw
thought,
one actually with someone like smoking or something, putting a cigarette, trying to
yeah,
light a cigarette off your candle head.
that was cool. So that was really special. And it was also in a wedding photo. So I don't, someone thought that was a really fun thing to pose in front of for your wedding video, but okay.
Well,
So
like
yeah,
definitely it's unique.
yeah, it is. It's very, I think they were holding hands, and then the candle head was sort of in between them, and they're like standing very seriously, and then it was zooming in. And that's
That's
what
great.
it is. Yeah. So I loved that. That was the best. But yeah, you just sort of, it was an open call. And I think that they're always interested in working with artists. So if you want to, reach out to I think you can find their administration page and find people to contact for that. Because yeah, they love doing art. They know the
Well,
value of
they did that really cool with light artists, I think, last year,
light.
which was really great too. All these different light pieces that worked with light, and so at night they were all
I missed
different things
that.
that were. It
Oh,
was really neat, yeah. And they had one. It was such a basic concept. It was almost like this long hallway with light, but then they had other pieces that would light up as you walk past them, and I
oh,
don't know. It's just
yeah.
again, it's very easy for people to be able to kind of connect, and there's something about surprise and light that kind of creates that joy too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love their art is so like what I love about it is it appeals to so many people, and it's like some of the stuff you genuinely just get such a kick out of. So it's different from, going into a museum and seeing something that you don't connect with at all and having to like read an artist statement. It's just so visceral. And that's what I actually love that concept and how they execute that. I think it's great and it's unpretentious. And
Well, in any way, I think you have art that you can actually touch too. Like I think as
yeah,
kids, if you're a lot of times your inclination is to go and like touch the sculpture and stuff. And I think that that's really neat to be able to do that and create that connection where it's not a hands-off type of environment. Yeah, I agree. Like
yeah.
Chicago does that really well too, with the bean and
Oh,
some of their other things too.
I didn't know that. That's
No,
really,
got to go to Chicago when you can.
yeah. I'm
They
gonna
have
go.
a great art institute as well, but they've got a lot of really cool public art.
Yeah, I like the mix. You need both, I think,
Hmm.
because it's nice to also like take the time to appreciate something that doesn't intuitively speak to you, but you don't want to do that 100% of the time, unless you go crazy. So it's good.
Exactly, it can be
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah,
Some things
exactly.
you just want to look at something. It's like that's just so cool, and I really love it just the way it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why I
Yeah.
like the distillery district. Yeah, and I think they spearheaded that vinyl photography thing in Toronto. I don't want to give them credit, but I actually think that they because I've since then I have seen that they've done it a few times now, and I've seen other photography murals up here in Toronto that I haven't noticed before, and it's all using the same vinyl technique, but they've improved on it. Like there's one piece that I can't remember the name of, but they used like a 3 million-year-old boulder, and they put it's two photographs of indigenous people on the boulder, and I think I've just seen it, so I don't even know I'm not going to make up a message for it, but it's incredible. It's in front of it was in front of the Ryerson Center for Contact. So that's just like another level on the vinyl photography idea, which is really cool to see. So I hope to see more
Well,
of it.
it's nice to make stuff like that accessible because presumably it's not so it's not going to be as expensive as a bronze sculpture or something like that, right? So it allows
Yeah,
people, like in the same way, I just love some of the murals, and I love the was it the dog fountain, just because it's kind of whimsical
oh
and
yeah,
fun, and it's
yeah,
still fine art, but it just makes you giggle, right? All those pugs
yeah,
spitting water
exactly.
into the fountain.
Yes, I know those things are great. Yeah, it's dirt cheap. Like the fountain isn't dirt cheap. The vinyl murals are really
Yeah,
cheap to print, so they're very accessible for people who want to set them up. If you want to set them up on your house or something, I would love
yeah,
to help
that's right.
because yeah, they're very cheap.
Okay,
It's
so
the
there's the call to
install.
action. If you want one of Sage's photographs on the side of your house, the cottage, the barn, just let her know.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I think
It
the
would be
most
really cool to do a whole barn in the middle. Like you can almost visualize this barn in the middle of like, I don't know, the prairies where it's like completely flat and this barn like, totally covered with your
that would be
photographs. Like
so
that would be
fun.
so cool.
Yeah, a grain silo. Oh,
Yeah.
that would be the best. Yeah, and those are really huge too, so you could do something massive. And it's flat, so it's easy to install, which would be really good. Oh,
Oh, I can see the I can see it ticking now.
yeah, I would love to do that. Oh,
So now you just need to find a grain silo residency program.
that would, someone should set that up, or if it doesn't already exist, because that would be a really good idea.
Hmm.
Um, I love the prairies. That's where my grandparents are from. So, but a lot of the areas that I know of are now just suburbs. So it would be neat. It's almost like an endangered species or an endangered lifestyle. That really old school, like with the grain silos and the train and I don't even know. I guess they put grain in the grain silos. And we had this sort of cowboy gas station it was like a rocking horse on the top, and they'd sell handmade saddles and stuff. It just doesn't, I can't find that anywhere anymore. So that would be really cool. I'm sure it still exists, just further away from Calgary.
Well,
But
it's interesting that I mean, it almost everything ties back to that whole invasive species, right? Like
yeah,
we're being invasive species in terms of losing some of that past and some of those kind of icons that kind of made kind of the Canadian landscape,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's true. It reminds me of, there's a book I've read another one of his books, but I just saw a title yesterday of his book, which is like, do we need pandas? And it's sort of like, do we really need that old, Western lifestyle? But also, I love the Western aesthetic and lifestyle. So I kind of want to preserve it, but I understand, things do die, but we should keep records of them and stuff. And we can preserve relics of that. But I guess it doesn't make sense to have a saddle shop anymore in a gas station in the middle of night. So,
I don't know. Maybe it's a new thing, but yeah, the whole general store is kind of a little bit gone, right, as things get more specific. But
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I'm hopeful that with COVID, people spending more time at home, they think about things differently. Maybe there'll be some changes, that in terms of how people want to live their lives, and that they may want to go to see Chuck, who owns the gas station and does the saddle shows, and buy your homemade jam, all in the same place.
Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah, I wonder if I know that chain stores have succeeded during the throes of COVID, but I'm hoping that now that things are, we can go into places with masks and it's social higher, like rules have been established, that people will go back to small businesses and that they'll be open. A lot of them are closed. That would be good because they
Mm-hmm.
need that support
Yeah, no, definitely.
for sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, this has been great. So now I'm going to ask you a couple of my quick questions.
Yeah.
Um, okay, what or who do you listen to when you're in the studio, when you're working?
Oh, oh man. A variety. I want to say Jillian Welch mostly. She just does guitar music with her buddy, and they're just as good live as they are on record, which is amazing. She's a folk singer.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what's your big hairy ass goal? What would you love to do in the future, regardless of how practical it actually is?
I want to do
Besides
more
the grain
murals.
silos. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like the grain silo would be great. That's my new goal.
I could almost see like a Christos type thing, like you wrapping something huge like the Eiffel Tower in your
Oh, that would be.
graphics. I mean, that's pretty hairy ass.
People would be very offended by that, but I love it.
I don't know. He did it. Mind you, he also there's a lot of controversy, I guess, when he did that stuff too, right?
Yeah, we could see that's part of the art is whether or not people get offended.
It would be cool though.
Yeah, it would be.
Hmm. Anyway, I don't know, something to think about. Like it would just be fun to be able to kind of figure out how to do something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to do that.
Any piece of advice you could give to kind of inspiring artists who want to try and launch into photography?
Oh, it's really like don't spend a lot of money on a camera. If you're going to invest in anything, especially at first, invest in whatever the story is, like for sure. Because when I started taking photos, it was not on a fancy big sensor or anything like that. It's amazing when you have good photography, people are willing to do and what they can do with small crappy files to make big, really good quality fine art prints. So don't worry about buying a super expensive camera at first for equipment. That's for sure.
That's interesting because that reminds me of Lori Ryerson, who's a photographer. One of her pet peeves is people are always like, well, what kind of camera do you have? And she's like, the camera doesn't take the picture. I take the picture, right? Like it's kind of, the camera's just the tool the same way that, you have a paintbrush or a palette knife or whatever.
Yeah.
And what kind of advice would you give to collectors looking to collect your work?
Oh, I don't know. Well,
Just
I
buy
would
it?
say, yeah, to buy it. But one thing is like, I know some, and this is sort of not maybe something I shouldn't say, but people buy them as investments. And just from an artist perspective, like it's a huge honor because I know what that means. It means you're expecting the price to go up exponentially, which is an investment really in my ability to continue to produce and all that. And I really take that seriously. But I think it's also such a gamble to do that. Like, I would buy something because you love it. And if you want to have a bajillion of them and keep them, that's, I'm not gonna say, no, you're not allowed to do that. But I wouldn't buy them and expect them to just magically go up in price. And I think some people think it's more likely than I think it really is. And I know that sounds pessimistic, but I think it's true. So that would be my advice.
See, this is my piece of thing. I think that people justify the purchase of art by convincing themselves it's going to be an investment. Because
Oh,
sometimes they need a little push, but if they love it, and they want to live with it, right?
that's true. That's probably
But
what it is. Yeah. Because I'm always wondering, how do they know? Like, they haven't vetted me or anything. So it's not, clearly it's not purely an investment. Like, it's because they want to buy it.
I think they can see though that it's something that's different and unique. And so I think when something's different and unique, then there's a much higher chance of it becoming,
Yeah.
something of an investment moving forward. But well,
Yeah.
let's hope it is. And this
Yeah.
interview will become super important in your, when you're
Yeah.
95 and it's like, how did she start? How did she do
Yeah.
stuff?
It's true. Well, hopefully it will be. I would love for them to make money back on their investments. I mean, they have technically already, but for them to actually make like good money, that would be great. I'd be
Yeah.
very
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully. Good luck.
Yeah. Thank
So we got to end it here because otherwise we're going to run out of time and I won't be able to
you.
post
Yeah.
it. So thank you so much. This has been really fabulous. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed
Thank you
this.
so much.
And I'm
Fun.
looking forward to seeing your next piece.
Yeah. I will I'll show them to you. And
Excellent.
I
Okay.
hope you're your stuff.
And so your hashtag is Sage S, what is
ZK.
it?
Sage
SZK.
K. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So everybody follow her work because it's super cool.
Okay.
Okay. And
Thank
we'll
you.
talk to you later. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
That was great. Thank you so much for joining. That was really cool. I love her work, and I look forward to seeing her next pieces that she's doing. So coming up, we have Jane Fleetwood Morrow, who does these really beautiful pieces inspired by water and kind of color palettes, I guess. Beautiful resin. And then Vicky Carruthers, who does kind of captures a lot of our northern landscape in really fun, bright, happy colors. So anyway, I look forward to hearing that as well. If you want to see any past episodes, they're on my IGTV. They're also on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/KateTaylorArt. And if you can subscribe, that would be great because I need to get some subscribers so that I'm more easily findable. Have a fabulous day and be creative.